Been in Florida for the past 3 weeks, doing car chaser stuff as usual. We're in. Did you hear that?
Well, that definitely picked up.
Let's go. In Texas for a weekend. This weekend, then we're back in Orlando next weekend, and then I'm home. And then the Indy 500 month starts. I'm so excited for Indy 500 month. I have to say,
Uh,
it's spring now, and I'm starting to get that feeling, and it's just I don't know. It's kind of a happy time when you just start to feel like it's getting to be that time of the year when we get to see Indy cars for a whole month and all that fun stuff.
that May feeling is, I think Mario said around 2019. I did get the email for the credential application. That was when it was real for me. We should have a good team going to Indy this year. I'm excited for that. But we're not quite to Indy yet. It's funny you mentioned the schedule too. It's like the IndyCar schedule and the karting schedule are very similar. Like you're saying, I was in Orlando for the last couple of weeks, and IndyCar obviously was in St. Pete, and much of the paddock was in Sebring, which we're going to be talking about a lot in this video. You're currently in Texas, which is why the show's a little bit late. When I put the EST behind the time, that means that some time zones are a little bit different. You're in the central time zone over in Texas, so it's actually 7 o'clock there, which I actually prefer Central Time. I grew up on it.
It is better.
Indiana. It is. It is. Not only in Indiana, this was what was so crazy. We got daylight savings time, I think, around 2004. I hated it. I still do. I think we were not only on Central Time in Indiana, but I don't think we changed our clocks either. So we were always on Central Time, no matter what, and that was fantastic. Wow, how funny is that Gary sent a super chat, which we'll talk about later, which says, about time for you to start covering F1. It's funny. If you had been a part of the pre-show, you would know why that's funny. I want to actually go back to last week's video and or last week's podcast and kind of spin off of something. Because obviously we had a guest, Don Rohr. If you did not listen to that episode, it might have been that I forgot to send Kyle the audio before I left for Sebring, and thus it was not available right away on the Apple Podcast or Stream or any of the streaming platforms. But if you did listen to it on YouTube, Don asked me a question right at the end, because we have a segment in this show called Kyle Gets Me in Trouble. Well, obviously Kyle was not with us last week for the Sebring preview, so I tried to get Don to get me in trouble, and he said something to the effect of, you're a liability, you get yourself in enough trouble. But he asked me a question that I thought was really interesting, and that was, what was the thing that got the most people in the industry like chirping at me? And it's not really something, believe it or not, it's not really something that happens all that often. There's not really, like, you see it on like social media with like super fans get yelling at me, right? That's fine. That's acceptable. That's part of the game. But like people actually in the industry, we're talking drivers, we're talking series officials, we're talking media members. It's not as common an occurrence for them to like, be in my DMs or be in my ats or being in my text messages yelling at me about what an idiot I am. There is a moment that did happen, and it happened very early on in this. And Kyle, I'll eventually have you chime in on this. But what it was, and I realized it after the podcast, it was the 2019 Fernando Alonso saga. The first time I had any kind of like media accreditation for IndyCar racing, it was when I got to go to the April test in Indianapolis. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to, spend some time in the McLaren pit. Well, as it turned out, I spent all of my time in the McLaren pit because I realized very quickly on that it was, monkey screwing a football bad. And just sitting there looking at that, I said in my video, I'm like, you know what? I think Fernando's going to get bumped. And that sent shockwaves everywhere because most people in the sport media, everybody was like, this kid's an idiot. Why'd you let him in to say something so stupid? Well, then it turned out that of course, Fernando Alonso got bumped. And that was a huge, I can't even tell you how huge of a moment that was in terms of my career, my credibility, all that stuff. But thinking back to that, I don't think it's ever been more intense from within the sport. Kind of questioning what I was doing or whether I knew what I was talking about. Kyle, thinking back to that moment, what was your observation? And you were definitely on the outside at that point. I don't even think we were really that close of friends at that time. Do you remember that very much?
Uh, I do remember that. I remember you saying that. And it's like if you watch the video, if you actually, most of these things happen if you actually watch the video and pay attention to what you're saying. It's like, oh, he wasn't that the same day that he like broke down on the apron? It's like
Yeah.
put
Oh
two and
yeah.
two together, folks. Like,
Well, and the
yeah,
and the crew
he's
members were
not
like
just
wearing like jeans and stuff. It was like, what the hell's going on
yeah,
here?
it's like he's not just saying this, but I do remember the backlash. It was fun. It was entertaining, as it always was, and just like as a moment, that was so early on. Like that was like you said, the first time uh, you were there credentialed, and so early on, like that sort of thing can kind of spook you a little bit. So
It really set the tone for things going forward. So that's actually the answer to the Don Rohr question from last week, because it kind of caught me off guard, because I'm like thinking, like sitting there going, because he asked specifically because he's in the industry, he hears a lot of talk. In fact, he comes to me sometimes with things that I don't even realize I piss people off with, because it's little things that I'm just like, why would anyone get mad about that? But that one in particular, I remember being a mainstream thing where people in the industry were like, who the hell is this guy? So I wanted to clean that up a little bit before we move on to this week's main topic, which it was a lot hotter of a topic than I thought it was going to be, because when I watched the 12 Hours of Sebring from my seat, and obviously I have a pretty good seat uh, these days, I was extremely entertained at the end of this race. Was it a complete? Was it something? The finish, was it not the most pure racing thing I've ever seen? No, I mean, it was a demolition derby, but the way I look at it, I didn't expect that many people would be upset with it in the way that they were.
yeah,
I understand it. I guess we'll start before we really get into the meat of this. Kyle, I know you guys were watching it. All the kart chaser folks were watching this. What was the reaction, at least from your guys' seat, watching it on television?
man, we had the whole crew in our Airbnb. You had it on the TV. Like just imagine couches. Everybody's on the couch. We're sitting in the back. There's like four of us in the back, probably 6 or 7 people on couches. We're all in there, and the wreck happens. I was jumping, screaming, and then I quickly pointed out that a BMW is P2, and I was freaking out. Everybody was screaming. It was pure excitement. I mean, it was I don't, especially in an IMSA race. There's been like races I've watched in like a group setting with a bunch of people that it's been absolutely electric and just fun, to be with a group of friends, and something huge happens and everybody goes crazy. I've never experienced that before with an IMSA event. I've never been. I don't. Recall any time you've been watching the end of a 12-hour endurance race. You're in a group of people, drinks in hand. Everybody just starts going epic because going crazy from the racing. So I mean, it was pretty spectacular. Now, like you said, was the finish the most pure thing ever? No, of course. What we would have wanted to see is them go cleanly, and then they keep passing each other, and then it becomes like a photo finish or something at the line. They finish. Okay, that would have been the most pure racing thing. But the incident wasn't malicious. No, it happened, and it was a moment that we're gonna remember for a long time. And it was just awesome. I'm very glad I was in the setting that I mean, if I wasn't at Sebring there to experience it, I'm glad I was with a group of friends, and it was a lot of fun to watch.
So I think we'll get back to the finish. There was a lot of things. I think there's three key points of why people think that this was a shit show. Um, and two of which, to me, are things that are not limited to Sebring. And we'll discuss each of these as kind of we go along. The first thing I would say is, number one, and again, we've known about this since the time they added the class, LMP3. We know LMP3 is a problem. We know the driving standards are absolutely poopy doo doo. Was this the worst showing from the P3s we've ever seen? I don't know. A Penske Porsche got run into
Maybe.
under yellow. That's going to be a tough moment to top.
Yeah.
The second thing would be, and again, this is something we've known forever. I think it was emphasized by the fact that you had the contrast between the IMSA race and the WEC race, but IMSA's caution procedure is way too long. And there are so many cars, especially in the IMSA race, where you had 53 cars start the race. Cautions breed cautions. You essentially had a full course yellow an hour at least at Sebring. They've got to do, in my opinion, IMSA has got to do code 60, which is, if you don't know what code 60 is, we're going to try to explain some of these sports car things, by the way, as we work through this episode, because sports car racing is pretty complicated. We talked about this in the podcast last week, talking with Don Rohr. You know, there's some barriers to entry that are kind of prevent stuff like IMSA from becoming mainstream popular. I think it's close, but things when we talk about code 60, what does that mean? Essentially, it is the ultimate version of a local yellow. What happens is when a code 60 is called, every car on the racetrack immediately turns on a speed limiter. I think in IMSA, in WEC, it is just literally the pit limiter. In Formula One, I think they actually have a two-stage limiter. They have one for the code 60s or local yellows, and then they have another one for the pits. But the point is, every car on the track neutralizes. The race becomes neutralized. Everyone drives around at a slow, safe speed. The incident is cleared, whatever it is, whether it's a stalled car, debris on the racetrack. It's cleared off, and then once the marshals are out of the way, the heavy equipment is out of the way, they throw the green, and the race goes right back to life. Now, is it possible to do that for every single caution? No, and WEC didn't even do that. I mean, hell, a Ferrari flipped over on the fifth lap, and they had to do a full course IMSA-style caution flag. But with the way IMSA does their yellows, and again, we've known this forever, they're too long. They have to wave all the classes around. They have to organize the classes. WEC doesn't do any of that, even on their full course yellows, and it keeps the race going. Now, it's more fair, but the problem with a code 60, or the problem a lot of people would have with a code 60, is that it allows teams and drivers that have done well in the race to keep their lead. I think a lot of why people were complaining about Toyota being 2 laps ahead was they ran a perfect race and none of their competition did. And none of their competition got any IMSA style wave arounds to be on the lead lap, to be in a position to be 3 wide in traffic going into turn 3 at Sebring. So I don't know, Kyle, was there anything past the cautions, LMP3s, the finish? Was there anything else that really made Sebring kind of seem like a shit show? Or is there any kind of point that you might have about the full course yellows or LMP3s that maybe I didn't touch on?
No. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think the code 60s, or what F1 calls the virtual safety car, needs to absolutely happen. Because I mean, like as you said, it can't be that way for every yellow, but just I've sat through so many IMSA yellows where it takes forever. I mean, IndyCar has the same issue sometimes too.
Yes. No, IndyCar needs code 62. Absolutely.
Because there's some wrecks where it's like, we don't need to spend 10, 15 caution laps on this. And the one thing that IMSA did, I think it was Petit Le Mans last year. Do you remember when they would split the classes up? And with the way GTD is right now, it would it absolutely screwed up the running order of GTD in the way it was.
The GT AM cars lapped the field, like the first 5 GT AM cars lapped the field.
And it wasn't based on pace. It was just based off of ordering the field under yellow. So the AM cars ended up having a lap lead on the pro cars, which makes it so confusing.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. So yeah, I'm surprised they don't do it, honestly. And I'm not saying that there should never be a point where you give an opportunity for cars to have their laps be given back, or try to reorder the class structure. I mean, I personally, like, this is the weird thing about the WEC versus IMSA comparison. Like, I enjoyed both races for what they were. Like, the WEC race was definitely a Formula One style very European, pure race, which it was like watching the WEC race was like sitting in your grandma's house having like a blanket and a hot cup of cocoa. It was comforting. It was just like, this is great. The IMSA race was like going to an NFL football game, right? Everybody's yelling and screaming and hollering, and there's all sorts of stuff happening, and fireworks and cheerleaders. Like, well, actually, the cheerleaders were on the grid at the WEC race, but whatever.
Drunk fans taking parts off cars.
Yeah, that we'll probably talk about that one later. That one that's Sebring, baby. I mean, that's what that's all about. Like,
not good, but
it's not. No.
Nothing less out of Sebring, though.
Yeah, we are not defending it, but like we expect nothing less. That is Sebring. They burn a couch every year, folks. Like, if you're surprised by that, like I was not shocked, right? Yeah. Was not shocked. Well, I don't know where I was going with. Oh yeah, that's right. So like, and I remember explaining to one of my friends who works, kind of the WEC beat, actually goes around the world with following the World Endurance Championship. He came over to me after the race and said, "What the hell was that?" And I said, "What you have watched was a NASCAR race, but like not like the modern NASCAR. Like the IMSA finish was like NASCAR, like 2005. Like that's how I felt about the current IMSA product. Is it as legitimate from a perspective, especially compared to like WEC? No. I definitely enjoy the fact that Ferrari could screw up their strategy, pit their cars, and then have to drive through all the GT cars and lose a lap to Toyota. Like, I appreciate that they got punished for that. Did it make the race worse? Absolutely. But Ferrari should have done a better strategy. So I don't know. The finish. I do want to talk a little bit about the finish, because I think there is a point to be made about this becoming a bit of a pattern in IMSA racing. Now, I didn't have a problem with this, the finish being what it was with the big crash, because if you look through the 71-year history of Sebring, there have been 71 runnings of this race. And as far as I can tell, this is the only time all the leaders have crashed in the final 30 minutes. The closest you can possibly get was the 2007 GT finish, where the Risi Ferrari and the Flying Lizard Porsche like were rubbing doors coming through turn 17. Like, that's the closest I can come at Sebring to something like this happening. So if this is the only time in 71 years we have a 3-car pileup for the lead, I'm fine with that. But to the broader IMSA scope, I was thinking about it, and you go back to, I think it was Daytona 2017. We had the Wayne Taylor car and the Action Express car run into each other. You go to the last couple of Petit Le Mans. You have 2020, where the 31 and 7 Penske ran into each other. You have this year's Petit Le Mans, where the 2 Ganassi cars ran into each other for the lead. And then you have this. So it is kind of becoming a pattern in IMSA racing to have the leaders crashing into each other. And frankly, I think the 10 car, if it had been running in the WEC race, probably would have been a lap or so ahead of the Penske Porsches, and we wouldn't have had the finish that we did. I don't know. Do you think, Kyle, that IMSA, the way the races play out, does it encourage some of this chaos and demolition derby stuff at the end?
It's a tough fine line, as you say. Like, the purist in me, the once that, like what you said about the WEC race being like being at grandma's house with a blanket, a warm cup of cocoa. Yeah, that I could go to a WEC race and not get mad about things just getting in the way and ruining the actual race, because a race is a set distance. Cars go until the checkered flag hits. That's it. Sometimes there's a yellow flag, but like there's not. I think basically that's a race. That is the definition of racing. It's cars racing each other for a set distance. Now, IMSA, you get the yellows that bring everybody back. You let people get their laps back. So within the last 30 minutes, more often than not than WEC, you're going to get everybody on the lead lap. And if the finish hadn't have had the battles that it had before the wreck, I think there would be a better point. But I mean, come on, we had 3 different manufacturers, 3 wide on the front straight. That was freaking awesome. That is like not just the crash. We have that to remember forever. and that's going to be amazing. That's amazing.
Don't you wish that would have been the finish?
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, these guys are going for it. Ultimately, I mean, it's not like these guys are going out and wrecking each other on purpose. I mean, they're absolutely just going for it. You know, it, Nobody did anything wrong. Porsche went to pass GT cars. Acura was there, and it happens. Same thing like Pippa to Ronnie in 21 on Taylor. He was
Yep.
going for it. He just went for the gap. Happens. Same with the Ganassi wreck last year. Like, it happens.
Yeah.
These guys are going for it. You're going for winning Petit Le Mans, the 12 Hours of Sebring, the Rolex 24. I mean, these are big events, and these guys are they're going for it. So I don't know. As much as I wish we get a finish that's just a fantastic battle, and they don't finish in a crash. I don't know. I I don't think there's anything that really makes it happen.
You brought up the point earlier that you didn't think the wreck was malicious, and it's pretty obvious that it wasn't.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, literally, Albuquerque was flashing his lights at the Porsche, trying to be like, get out of the way. I don't have control over it. And in fact, the best example I can give you is that the same crash happened in the WEC race. A lot of people don't think about this, but I'm gonna expand your mind here for a second. Now, it was a different situation because it was GT cars on a prototype versus prototype on prototype. But if you think back to when the 51 Ferrari crashed, or was it the 50? It was one of the two Ferraris. I wish they paint them slightly differently so I knew which car it was. But one of the Ferraris ran into a GT car, got essentially shoved out wide, and then couldn't stop and T-boned another car across the corner. And like that's going to happen. Like, it happened in the WEC race, and it happened in the IMSA race, and one race is being called a shit show and the other one's not being called a shit show. Like, I think it's just racing. Like, that happens sometimes. And like I said, it's the only time in 71 years that we've had this specific situation happen. And 99 times out of 100, we probably don't have that happen.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like a Daytona Talladega race where everybody's going to crash right at the end, right? Like, this was a one-time thing, I think. And I could be proven wrong. Long Beach, we could have a 15-car pileup on the last lap, and we could continue that trend for the rest of the IMSA season. But I think in this particular case, that particular scenario, the perfect storm happened where you had that big of a pileup.
Yeah, I mean, I just lost my train of thought.
Well, how about I jog your memory a little bit? LMP3. Now.
Yep. That's exactly the point. Yep.
Oh, okay.
I was going to say, you think about the number of yellows throughout the race, and you get rid of LMP3. How many yellows do we really have?
Right.
So, I mean, if there's anything that could lead to these races ending the way they are, jumbling up, getting the field back together, and getting everybody back in the lead lap, how many yellows are LMP3 causing to do this?
Virtually all of them. Yes, 100%. Those are the full course yellows, are the GT, or the LMP3 cars. The word on the street, and it has been the word on the street for quite a while, is that LMP3 is going away at the end of the year. So I think IMSA knows that. The problem is, and I brought this up on Twitter, is that I think the thing that we ignore a little bit, because they're not quite as blatant, they don't run into cars under yellow like the LMP3s do, but the LMP2s still have a fair share of full course yellow responsibility. Yeah. And what I'm worried about is that all these dentists you complain about, and I hate to say that because like everybody like implies that that's Dr. Jack Miller. I don't remember a time where Dr. Jack Miller ran into the back of somebody under yellow. Like, the IndyCar quote unquote bad driver standard is so much higher than like it is anywhere else. It's hilarious to me. Like, people were like, this makes me so upset. I'm just going to go on a quick rant here. Like, if you guys really honestly, like the amount you guys were crapping on Jimmy Johnson and Dalton Kellett last year was ridiculous. Like, Dalton and Jimmy would have like put like multiple laps on Milcaduno, like multiple laps. And it wouldn't have even been like, you have to realize how high the competition level in IndyCar is right now. Like
they were what, half a second to a second off the like pole times every weekend. That's that's pretty good. I don't think people understand how good these guys are.
Right. But they don't. Like they just see, like, they see a guy crash or a guy be run 27th and be half a second off and say, "Oh, that guy sucks." It's way different in IMSA. What I'm worried about is that, first of all, the LMP3s have been overshadowing how much chaos the LMP2s cause. And when we get rid of LMP3, the problems that the LMP2s cause are going to be amplified, microfied. We're going to see them way easier, causing chaos and trouble. And I'm also worried that a lot of the guys who were in LMP3 are just going to say, "Well, screw it, I'm going to go buy an Orca." Like there were spare chassis. Like I ran into the Dragon Speed chassis just sitting out in the Porsche Cup garage. Like, I bet you somebody bought that car, and I bet it was an LMP3 driver. So it's like,
I mean, the LMP2 winner wrecked at one point in that race. Like,
right. And it was not crashed by a gentleman driver. It was crashed by a guy who runs top 5 in Indy NXT.
Yep.
So I don't know. That's the thing that I kind of see with IMSA is like the blame for LMP3 is just going to be passed to LMP2. And that's kind of why I suggested on Twitter that really they should just treat the prototypes like the GT cars. Have one rule set and then just say, well, if you're a Pro-Am lineup, you get a trophy. And if you're the first Pro-Am lineup. That's what I would do. I don't think you need like 3 prototype classes. No. I just don't think you do.
I don't think you do.
Because how did that work for GT when we had 3 or 4 different classes? Like, it's like GT objectively is probably the best I've ever seen it. Ever. Like, I love GTLM. The factory stuff was great. But like the fact that we have 30 cars running in a line like the entire race, that's awesome. Like, it's awesome. I can't.
Yeah, but they separate them GTD, AM, and Pro, and then it just totally becomes moot.
Yeah. Well, that's true. But they race. I mean, by the time they get the AM driver out, like, it becomes a Pro.
Yeah, but I'm saying, like, during the yellows when they separate the classes.
Oh yeah, they should
mix everything up.
Yeah.
If they just ran it like one separate class and then gave the awards out differently, then it'd be better.
I do agree with that. I actually do agree with that. I mean, an ideal IMSA, like, like the old meme where like the big Doge and the little cryy Doge, like the big Doge would be like IMSA with 2 classes, right? It'd be GTP and GT. Mm-hmm. Boom. And then you have a Pro-Am like trophy. Like, you have a 4th step on the podium where the Pro-Am driver lineup that won gets a trophy.
Yep.
That's what I would do. Now, of course, they re-signed with LMP2 for the next 5 years. But what I found interesting, and I don't know anything yet about this. I mean, I'm just kind of speculating. So this is speculation for those of you who cannot tell the difference. I'll spell it out for you. The fact that the ACO continues to push back LMP2 2.0, and the fact that it seems like it's going to leave the WEC in the next year because all the other teams are moving on to different classes, I suspect that there probably is not an LMP2 2.0, and that the long-term plan is to phase that class out and then just go full hypercars.
That's weird, my opinion. Because WEC LMP2 is so healthy.
Well, but it's all teams that are like Alpine. They're building their own car. I can't remember. This is where Chris Aurelio would come in. There's a couple of teams, 3 or 4 teams that are either building or buying their own car and then going to hypercar. So really, it's like there might be one car that would stay at that point, and then like, what's the point of having an LMP2 class for one car? I don't know.
True.
That's the other thing that kind of came up was, and I brought this up on the podcast last week, is that it sounds like Super Sebring is dead. It sounds like the WEC is not coming back to Sebring, and that begs the question: where does WEC go in the U.S.? The rumors that I've heard are that it's going to go to Indianapolis. Roger Penske currently has all of the series that he participates in, except for WEC, running at Indianapolis. IMS is a grade 1 track. Roger's keen on sports car racing. And as you guys have been pointing out in the chat, yes, I did break the fact that they can run sports cars at night at IMS. Kyle, outside of IMS, where would you like to see a World Endurance Championship race in the U.S. I've got a couple of thoughts once you give the course.
There's only one right answer to this, and that's Road Atlanta.
Oh my God, that would be. Oh, thank you.
Listen, IMS sounds cool, Roger. I love the idea, but
Yeah.
like great idea on paper, awesome. I love that you want to have a race at IMS, that you want to put money into it. Like you're for it, you want it, but like please don't do that because the track is just so boring and we see it so often. I remember there was a time in my life where I thought, man, it probably was around the time when Grand Am started running it. And after, like, it had been a few years between F1 there and Grand Am, where I watched the first ever Grand Am race on the IMS road course. And I was like, man, they should use this more. Like, why don't they use
Oh,
the
boy.
road course as much?
It
And
was
here
your
I
fault.
am.
I'm blaming you.
And here we are. We see it how many times a year, and it just sucks. I hate it. If there was one thing I could eliminate from modern racing right now, it would be that we only race at the IMS road course twice a year, the Indy GP and the IMSA race. Though. That's it. That's it.
I would even reduce that by one. I would just say IMSA race.
No, keep the GP. Whatever. I don't care.
No, let's do an extra week of qualifying. That's what I say. But
well, then run the summer race. IndyCar can run in the road course once,
the summer
twice.
Well,
no,
I don't know. The problem is the summer race. No, I do agree with Kevin. Keep the 8 hour. The 8 hour can stay. We can keep that puppy. No, the summer race at IMS is going to be a lot more difficult to have on the road course in the next couple of years, and I'll just say that. Okay, so Road Atlanta. Yes, they did. Well, what's interesting is that it was technically, it wasn't. It's not in the WEC or World Endurance Championship record books, but they did run 2 races in the Intercontinental Le Mans Cup in 2010 and 2011. I went to the 2011 race, got to see the Audis, the Peugeots, the Aston Martin V12s, the GT2 Lotus Evora, which was the loudest effing car I've ever heard in my life. I can't believe how loud that car was. There were so many amazing cars at that race. At that track, it was magical. But I also knew at the time that this was the last time they were ever going to let that happen. Road Atlanta is, in my opinion, one of the best road courses in the world. But it is not a racetrack that I think the FIA wants anything to do with. And that makes me so sad that you suggested that, because I'm just thinking about how awesome that would be.
It's the only right answer.
It's the only right answer. Let me give you some wrong ones. Coda would be an obvious one. They've done it before. That was actually the US round that replaced Sebring the last time, actually.
Absolutely disgusting.
I hate it. I know. No one came. That was really the reason that it went away, is that just no one showed up to support that race. In fact, they even did a doubleheader with the ALMS a couple of times. The other suggestion I heard, which I really actually liked, came from our friend Rob. I'm sure you know him. But Robbie said they should do a Christmas time WEC race at Sebring, like a standalone 10-hour event. And I said, yep, I would love that. So, but I just don't think, I think it's Indianapolis or bust. I just don't, there's just not another track. Well, okay. Hear me out. You want to hear something really crazy, Kyle? Hear me out.
Hold on. I'm surprised you haven't said Watkins Glen yet.
Watkins Glen would be cool. I just don't think it would happen. I just don't think it would happen. The only way, the problem is with all these tracks, and before I get to my suggestion, the problem with all these tracks is, like, it's disappointing that all these cars, especially when they do a doubleheader with IMSA, when all those cars are on site at the same time. Like at Sebring, we had every single eligible car between IMSA and WEC for this particular rule set. Every single one was there that is currently built and running, but they were not racing in the same race. And I think that was disappointing. I would much rather have seen Ferrari, Toyota, Van Wall, Glickenhaus run the 12 hours. And I think that's the biggest problem with the doubleheader. It's amazing. It's amazing value for money if you buy the whole ticket for Super Sebring. But there is a disappointment factor that all of the best cars and all the best teams, it kind of feels like kart and IRL. It's like, this is cool, but like not everybody's here. And that's kind of what it feels like sometimes. And so I think that would probably be what would happen at Watkins Glen. They'd probably run with the 6 hours, and then it would be like its own event. It would be kind of like the Can-Am race they ran in the 70s. You'd have a little bit of crossover, but it wouldn't be great. Here's my suggestion. Hear me out, Kyle. This is really going to blow your mind. Miami.
Okay.
The Dolphin Stadium.
That still does nothing for me.
It does nothing for me, but that's something that the FIA would do.
Because like those tracks, like when you tell me about Miami and Las Vegas, it excites me like to know I can watch it on TV, but I know that there's absolutely zero chance of me getting to actually visit those tracks. So I don't.
You wouldn't be able to, like a sports car race. You'd probably be able to visit Miami.
If it was a one-off, if it was on the F1 weekend, then hell no.
Oh no! I'm not saying on a F1 weekend. I'm saying like
maybe
they use the Miami track because it's like they only have to shut down like one road to run the track.
Yeah,
like,
if it's not NFL season, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, which is right now.
Yeah.
So
I don't see why not.
That's my thought. Is that maybe that's the wild card would be the Miami stadium.
They would never be smart enough to think of that though.
Well, hey. To all of the French that are listening to this,
I feel like that's at the bottom of the like. Nobody would think of that.
Well, I just thought of it. It's in the universe. We're Fernando Alonsoing this thing.
I'm shocked.
Speaking of shocking, and I did not think I could be shocked by this. The NASCAR TV ratings are getting worse. I thought because there was a time where the NASCAR TV ratings were just absolutely falling off a cliff from about 2014 to around 2019. They were just tanking. I mean, it was unbelievable how many viewers NASCAR was fleeting. But then around the end of 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, the ratings kind of stabilized. The bleeding had stopped. But recently, this season especially, we have seen drop-offs that are absolutely massive. The Atlanta race lost 600,000 viewers from last year. And I'm looking at this tweet from Ron, which is spelled RONH2, which says the TV numbers for 2023 versus 2022 and the percentage drops. Daytona, 7.7% down. Fontana, only 5.6% down. We get to Las Vegas, minus 12%. Phoenix, minus 15%. Atlanta, minus 14.5%. What is going on? What is it? Is this really the Clyde Elliott effect? Like, is Chase really worth 600,000 people or 15% of NASCAR's overall audience?
You said even the Daytona 500 was down, right?
Yeah, 7%.
Yeah, so even I was gonna say it was probably the March Madness weekend kicking off. It was probably due to the fact that the last two races have been won by the same guy, so there's really absolutely nothing going into this event to hype it up or make people want to watch. So, but the fact it's been the whole season, that's kind of degrading and sad.
And just for posterity's sake, the F1 race at Saudi Arabia, which everyone told me was boring. Unfortunately, I missed it. I missed all the racing on Sunday. I was in a mall. I was in an F1 store in a mall, which was quite interesting during an F1 race.
Was that in Orlando?
Yes. So if you go to the Florida Mall in Orlando, you can go to an open Sears and an F1 store. Huh. But the prices were ridiculous.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was like, I was thinking like, you know what? If there's a $60 shirt or maybe like a $40 hat, like, yeah, that's kind of pricey. But I'll like it, especially because on the sign it says like Williams and Haas. I'm like, if there's a Williams shirt, I'm going to buy the Williams shirt. Like, that's kind of neat. Like, that's cool if that's available to purchase. The coolest thing was like they had an AlphaTauri hat. They had some Alfa Romeo stuff. But there wasn't really like a lot of variety. It was a lot of Max. It was a lot of Ferrari. It was a lot of Lewis Hamilton. Like, obviously, they had a rack of Fernando Alonso stuff with Aston Martin on it, which was kind of neat. But like, for the most part, like it's a store that like I kind of was shrugged my shoulders going out of and going like, if I want to buy F1 stuff, like there's a million different places I can get this better. I can go to Tom at Gutswear and get way better stuff than that. Cheaper too. But like, where was I going with that? Oh yeah, Formula One. The Formula One race, while the actual TV rating was down, and remember, TV ratings are determined based on how many TVs are on, right? So the TV rating can go down, but the viewership can go up. So the F1 viewership for Saudi Arabia went up from last year. Now, was it only about 10,000 people? Sure. But the F1 ratings have been flat, while NASCAR and IndyCar, even though we haven't seen or heard from them in about 3 weeks, have been going down. So I don't know what to make of that.
That probably doesn't even include the F1 TV numbers, which is how I was watching.
Right. And that's and as we know, that's the reason F1 gave their TV contract away for free to ESPN in what was that, 2017, I feel like.
Somewhere around there.
Was to have the streaming rights because NBC wanted the streaming rights. F1 said, no, thank you. And now they've got a $100 million contract from ESPN when they gave it away for free to begin with. And they get to keep the streaming rights and they get to stream it to anyone who wants to watch it. So, yeah, I will tell you that in that Florida Mall during the F1 race, I saw at least 2 Red Bull jerseys being worn in the
I
mall.
was at Universal Studios on Monday and I saw a dude in a Max Verstappen shirt and hat. They're everywhere. Wow. They're everywhere. Just walk around Florida a little bit. They're everywhere.
So the question I guess I have is it only Clyde, aka Chase?
No. It's just
so. What is it? Why are people tuning out of NASCAR?
Part of it probably has to do with Fox. We complain about Fox so much.
Yeah.
Right now, that's probably, if I can narrow down the worst thing in NASCAR right now, it would be Fox in the coverage. Other than
the
that,
NBC TV ratings are typically way worse than Fox, by the way.
Yeah, which is sad, but the coverage itself is actually better. Well, that's an interesting point. I have no idea what it could be because there seems to be enough promotion. Seems like the only thing I can think of is especially right now is March Madness heating up. Obviously Byron just won 2 races. Hendrick is just gone right now. So there's not really anything too crazy right now this early in the season.
But that's like saying, like, that's the thing that pisses me off every year around Long Beach. They go, the Masters. It's like, the Masters has always happened. March Madness has always happened. Like, that's not the explanation. Like, the other thing you mentioned, and I will just say this about NASCAR's TV, I think and I know people are mad at Mike Joy right now, but like for me, like the booth for NASCAR and Fox is way better than NBC. I think NBC, there's too much screaming. Like it's screaming and yelling and hollering over each other. And I don't like that so much, especially when it's like incoherent. It's not like John Hindhaugh, covering an IMSA race and he like starts screaming and yelling. Like that's exciting. But like when it's NASCAR and it's like, and it's funny sometimes when Dale Jr. goes like, my God, that's funny. Like, but like for the most part, NBC, I think their production, their direction is better for NASCAR, but like I think the broadcast booth is better. And the fact that Fox keeps a fairly consistent team. I know they changed the third guy now since Darrell Waltrip left, but like having Mike Joy and Clint Boyer in the booth for every single race gives some consistency to the Fox broadcast. Now the direction, the amount of ads, those are the problems. I don't think it's the booth that's the problem. But I will say this, like I watched the Phoenix race. In fact, I watched Daytona, Fontana, Phoenix. In fact, the only one I missed was I missed Las Vegas and I missed Atlanta.
Atlanta was last weekend.
But the Phoenix race I thought was just boring as hell.
Yeah, it was terrible.
I mean, it was bad. And that's me, a race fan, saying that. So I don't know, man. Is it just because it's boring right now? I mean, do we really, because like I think back to the big moments in NASCAR last year, and it was Bubba Reck, Kyle Larson, and the Hale Mellon, and I think Denny was involved in some controversy last year. Tony Stewart was mad at NASCAR. His team kept getting penalized. Like those were like the high points last year in NASCAR. Like none of that's happening right now, is it?
Yeah, it was all later in the year.
But is that like what we're watching NASCAR for? Intentional wrecks, penalties, and like what are we and just like crazy batshit things that Ross Chastain did? Like is that what we're like the racing now has just completely taken a back seat? I mean, why? I guess I don't understand that part.
I mean, I guess we're just missing. I think we're missing. It's so hard to pass right now. Like honestly, with the racing in general. Plus, they get qualifying in 20 minutes of practice. That just it's the same thing every week. It almost feels like last year. I mean,
Yes, that's a huge like that. I want to emphasize that. That's a huge because that's a big thing. I think about that when I didn't realize that, but subconsciously when I tune into a NASCAR race, I think that now. I go, this is going to be the same thing over and over and over again. That's a great point.
yep. It's like Hendrick's so fast right now. It's like, oh, Byron and Larson have been the two guys battling for the lead since Vegas. It's crazy. When's Larson going to get taken out? I don't know if that has a huge deal to do with the rating, but it's just I guess that is kind of a thing right now.
The highest point in NASCAR though was like when Jeff Gordon and Mark Martin and Dale Earnhardt and Dale Jarrett were dominant. Like there's always been dominant drivers.
I think technically
Like
the high point of NASCAR was like 05. You're thinking like 5-6 years earlier.
Well, that's true, but like the biggest, we'll put it this way, the growth period, like when the TV ratings were going up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when people were tuning in to NASCAR and going, "This is awesome, I gotta watch this." It was when Jeff Gordon was dominating, killing the field every week. Like, I don't like. Do we need to put Kyle Larson in a rainbow car? Is that it?
Jeff
Is
Gordon
that
was
the difference?
basically everywhere too. Like if
Yeah.
it's the same thing with F1, right? It's like Max Verstappen is winning every single race. And NASCAR fans and racing fans are looking at this. You see it all over Twitter. How is this exciting? Oh, the same thing. Oh, Max Verstappen wins the race. But guess who's been marketed very well? Guess whose
Yeah.
face is everywhere, all over the world? Max Verstappen.
In the
So Max
Sebring Walmart.
Verstappen, yeah, Max Verstappen winning is not necessarily a bad thing. Just like Jeff Gordon winning back in the day when he was literally in Looney Tunes and on the face of cereal boxes. Is that a bad thing that Jeff Gordon's winning all the time? Like we're showing him off as this guy who's supposed to win everything. Is it a bad thing? Of course, we're still going to tune in because that's our guy. It's like,
Wow.
yeah, you ever thought about that?
That's a
Who are we
great,
marketing in NASCAR right now like that?
no one.
No one.
Well, here's the thing: in the Sebring or not the Sebring Walmart, but the Walmart that's one down, the town down. I was staying in a place called Frostproof. So there's a Walmart between Sebring and Frostproof. That was the Walmart I went into, and I walked in, and I posted about this on Twitter. What are the two faces I see of race car drivers? Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen. Who are the two F1 drivers who have won races this year? Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen.
Yep.
That's amazing. And then Fernando Alonso, everybody knows who he is here because he ran the Indy 500.
Yeah.
So it's like the three top guys in F1 are to a certain extent, and then Lewis. So it's Max, Sergio, Fernando, and Lewis. Those are your faces here. And everybody knows them because everybody sees them. How amazing is that? I'll put it this way. I hope this doesn't get me in trouble. Who would have thought that Fernando Alonso coming to do the Indy 500 would benefit F1 in the long run? Who had that on their bingo card in 2017? Ay. Speaking of, David's about to get David in trouble. This is a bit of a spin-off of the Kyle segment. And we will still have the Kyle segment if Kyle wants to take it. But I have a thought. And I had this thought this weekend in Sebring. And I think this is going to be extremely controversial. I can't even believe that I'm about to say this. But
I gotta get ready for this. I gotta get in. Nice.
Tie your socks down. Get ready, chat. This is going to be, I don't know how you're going to feel about this. So I'm sitting at Sebring, and especially for the World Endurance Championship race, sitting there looking at all these amazing cars. Like, I'm looking at the Ferrari, which is just crazy looking monster of a car. Then I look at the Peugeot, and that looks like a flying saucer. I'm like, that's so cool. And I swear, every time that Peugeot came by, everybody turned their head like, wow, what a cool car. I heard these like this. I was sitting eating lunch on the grandstand. And this guy and his girlfriend were just sitting there going, man, that car is so cool. I love it. Every time I see it go by. So many cool cars. Kyle, what do the manufacturers, Porsche, Ferrari, who's the third one? Oh God, I'm going to forget this. I had this all planned out.
Cadillac?
And now I'm going to forget it. What's up? Oh, Toyota.
Cadillac?
Porsche, Ferrari, Toyota, which were 3 manufacturers in the World Endurance Championship, and Lamborghini, which is going to be coming into the World Endurance Championship next year. What do those 4 manufacturers have in common?
I don't know.
In the last 5 years, each of those manufacturers has looked at IndyCar very seriously, thought about doing a program, and have not done it. They are in sports cars now. What is the difference? What does IndyCar need to do?
The cars look different. Oh.
IndyCar needs balance of performance.
You hate this.
I hate this, but I cannot. I this weekend I accepted this fact because at St. Pete, you missed this, but all the IndyCar brass got up and talked about what they wanted to do with the series going forward. And one of the things that Jay Fry mentioned was, his 5-year plan that he's always talked about. And he said, the one thing that we didn't do, we got all these teams, we got all this great, we got a great TV deal, all this stuff. The one thing we didn't do was get a third manufacturer. Well, I've just mentioned 4 manufacturers that they talked to, got very close with a couple of them. Those manufacturers are in sports cars now. In almost every one of those cases, the manufacturer wanted to do something different, and IndyCar said, well, we can't do that. And the manufacturer said, okay, sorry, we can't play ball here. I realized that now the game has changed. As much as I love pure racing, as much as I love the fact that mechanical technology or mechanical innovation, teams and manufacturers bringing the best thing to the track and competing head to head and seeing who's the fastest. That's the racing that I want to see. However, when I watched the World Endurance Championship race and I saw all these cool cars and I saw the reactions to those cool cars, the car still matters to casual racing fans, to hardcore racing fans, to people who've never seen a race in their life. But what we've realized now is that there is one way to go through the air. The most efficient way to go through the air is the way that everyone's going to copy. What does the Aston Martin look like this year? It looks like the Red Bull. Every other car is going to eventually look like the Red Bull in F1. IndyCar cannot do open development. Everyone has been very clear about that from day one. We're never going to go back to that, unfortunately. This is the best way that I can see to accomplish a few different goals. Number one, you get the manufacturers back on board. You say, hey, do you want to build a V8 engine? Cool. Do you want to have a car that looks different? Cool. Do you want to have a car without a wing on it? Cool. You can do that. We're just going to balance you to everybody else. Now, am I suggesting that IndyCar should change the rules every single week to favor one or the other manufacturer? No, I think it would have to be within reason. But I think if you want manufacturers involved, this is the path you're going to have to go down because clearly the market is speaking. That's how I feel about it. Or you can just go like full sprint car racing and just have everybody build their own engines again. But you have to, right now where IndyCar is, I don't think it's going to get more manufacturers than Honda or Chevy with the current formula that is being utilized.
I mean,
That's
NASCAR has found a way to make all the cars look different and have manufacturer identity and still keep them relatively the same. So why can't IndyCar do that?
Well, it's tough to have manufacturer identity with open wheel cars.
Well, sure, but still.
I don't think it's impossible, though. Like, you look at that Ferrari, and, like, couldn't you just cut off a couple of inches from the fenders and that's an IndyCar. Like how far off is a prototype now from an IndyCar?
And we have the formula already figured out from IMSA that we could give the manufacturers a Dallara tub and tell them build off of this.
Yeah. Or if they want to build their own stuff, what is stopping them?
That's true. It would
as
be
long
like,
as they're willing to sell it. That's the thing.
Yeah.
If they're willing to be like Porsche, and even Porsche's having some trouble getting their cars to the people who have bought them. But like, if a manufacturer is willing to sell their own car, why not?
I would be worried about the efficiency of doing this and being able to figure it all out and have 33 cars for an Indy 500, because we've struggled before with it with a spec like manufacturer and car before.
The way I would do it is just have like a generic, like have Dallara design, like write some rules, some basic guidelines, dimensions, whatever. Have Dallara build something and then say, okay, have fun. But like then balance whatever the generic Dallara is to whatever other manufacturers coming in. That's what I would do. But then again, how are you going to get an engine? That's the eternal question with IndyCar. Where do the engines come from? I guess with a BOP formula, you could just like put a hopped up Indy Lights engine in it.
That's a good point. I mean, it would make sense to let Dallara just build their own car if they wanted to, and that could be a base, and then just tell other manufacturers, hey, if you see, that's the thing. That's what we've been saying for years, anyways. Is like, why not let other manufacturers outside of Dallara build anything? And we all know why they can't do that. It's because they have a hell of a contract with Dallara, but still, I mean,
I get the sense from Dallara that they're like, I don't think Dallara minds competition. I really don't.
I don't think so either.
Why would they be running in other series where they compete? They've got enough exclusive contracts. Like, I don't think like this thing with Dallara is as ironclad as we make it out to be. I think it's IndyCar that kind of puts themselves in those shackles, in my opinion.
I think it would make sense to have other chassis manufacturers as well, like a what am I thinking of here? Like the other LMP2 manufacturer, like the.
Well, LMP2 is a bad example because they tried to do like
imagine, yeah,
but it wasn't.
Imagine like being able to build like an Orica chassis to then like a Porsche could, or an Acura or a Honda could build a car based off a different IndyCar tub. I've always thought that, because I think IndyCar, when it came to engines, wasn't there a thing where like Cosworth wanted to build an engine, but they were told they had to be set up with a manufacturer.
You have to have an OEM.
Yeah.
And part of that is because IndyCar, like, the manufacturers aren't competitors, they're partners. There's a very important difference and distinction between those things. If they're a partner, that means IndyCar expects more than just you show up with an engine that's legal. You have to pay for race promotion. You have to pay for television ads. You have to pay for, to sponsor races. Like, it's not just like, that's why IndyCar wants another manufacturer, and probably why they haven't gotten one is like the cost of entry is extremely high. It's not just Cosworth goes, hey, we got an engine. Who wants to buy one? It's not that simple. And it's not in the current. So I don't know. It's a way for me to think outside of the box. Like, I'm not in any position to solve their problems, right? Like, but like for me, like, I wonder if that's ever been even pitched. I haven't heard anything. I just want to be very clear. Like, I haven't heard this is any kind of consideration. I just look at the motorsports landscape right now, and I say, where are the manufacturers? Manufacturers are outside of F1, which F1. Anytime I bring up F1 as a comparison to IndyCar, it's like, well, they have billions of dollars. Okay, let's not talk about F1. Let's look at IMSA. Comparable budgets for the most part with the teams. Lots of manufacturers. What's the difference? BOP. So if that's the road we want to go down, attracting manufacturers, that's, I think, probably the direction IndyCar needs to go. And I hate saying that. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but it could be good. It would be something that I would have my mind open to. I'll put it that
way. Are you saying?
Oh, sorry, I did not explain what BOP is. Balance of performance, meaning the cars are like the series nannies the manufacturers and the teams to make the cars equal as they can possibly make them. So, like for example, sometimes, like we saw with IMSA and GT, they'll get it wrong from time to time. The Porsche was way off at Daytona. They adjusted the balance of performance, gave the Porsche a little bit less weight, a little bit more horsepower. The Porsche wins at Sebring. Now, racing purists like me say, I wish Porsche would just do a better job. But that's not how the class is designed. It's designed so that the series controls how fast you go. But the manufacturers feel safe in that because the onus isn't on them anymore to design, develop, spend more money. They just say, our car isn't fast enough, give us more horsepower. And the series goes, okay.
Sometimes you can trick that, and you can, go a little. You can. They have ways to get around sandbagging, but sometimes you can go a little slower in testing, and then when the race comes, all of a sudden you're really fast.
I'll tell you this: if we had
That's why everybody gets mad about BOP. If you ever see it on Twitter or social media, that's why. Because sandbagging.
And one of the good things that they've done with the hypercars and the LMDHs and the GTP cars is that they set the BOP at the start of the season and gave an endpoint for when they're going to change it again. They're like, we're not changing this until after Le Mans. So you have to go fast given what we've given you. And I think that is the right way to do it. You need to have, I would say, like, if IndyCar did this, I would say, like, have, like, 2 times you adjust during the season, right? So, like, maybe you adjust right before the Indy 500. Well, maybe you don't. Right after the Indy 500, and then maybe once more during the summer. Maybe you only do it once a season, right after the Indy 500. So that potentially a manufacturer could get the Indy 500 by sandbagging and then would lose the championship because they sandbag. I'll tell you this, if IndyCar did have BOP, that April test that we would go to would be like everyone would go 10 miles an hour. It would be ridiculous, but it would be something to talk about. That's the other thing. We would have so much content out of that. We would have because everyone would be mad the whole time, and it would be great.
So are you saying this because you believe this or you want this? No.
I believe
it. Are you saying this? Or are you saying this because it's better than what we're doing now? What we're just sitting around.
I'm saying it because I think IndyCar's goal is to get more manufacturers. Mm-hmm. And I just don't see the path they're going to get more manufacturers on their current trajectory. I like what they do. I like the fact that Honda and Chevy are competitors against one another, even if they're not technically competitors within the series itself. Like Honda wants to beat Chevy and Chevy wants to beat Honda. And I like that. And they have to do it by spending cubic dollars. But that's expensive. And the cars are the same because it's expensive. But if there was a one-time cost to design a car that looks cool and has some manufacturer styling cues, and you get to race it in the Indy 500, and everybody goes, wow, that Indy car kind of resembles an NSX. That's kind of cool. I don't know. That's just a thought. It's something to talk about rather than nothing. That's how I feel. Like, and if you had a car that was radically different, like the Peugeot, show up at the Indianapolis 500, they're going to steal the headlines. Everybody's going to be taking pictures of that car. That's going to be in every thumbnail of my videos. Like, and every casual person is going to stand up and go, wow, that car looks different. It would be like back in the day with the turbine cars or, the Penske Ilmore or any, name a car that was different. And
for the sake of the health of the series, no matter what happens, whenever we get a new chassis, for the health of the series, the 2 things that absolutely cannot happen or needs to happen, 1, the cars need to look different. That's if the cars look the same with the next chassis and the next rule set,
oh boy, I didn't even
whatever
think about
year that is, and then that goes on for another 10 years, we're in trouble. Number 2, we need to design cars that are way different from F1 cars. We need to totally differentiate ourselves from F1. We need a car that people can look at and they just know that's an Indy car, not an F1 car, which is it's hard to do with an open wheel car, but it needs to happen. Those are the 2 things that just with the next car, if either of those 2 things, if only the one happens, we might be okay. But if we If the next car comes out and they're all the same and they can still be mistaken for F1 cars because they're not flamboyant or cool looking, I don't know if we make it another 20 years.
The way you differentiate F1 from IndyCar is do more ovals.
I mean, yeah. But just in looks alone, like, you need to do something really
I agree.
out there.
But an IndyCar on an oval, like like when the IndyCars race at Texas, so you take a picture of an IndyCar at Texas, it looks different than an F1 car.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing staring us in the face, is that, like, Tony George was wrong on a lot of things. I think he might have been right about the oval tracks. We don't have to be all ovals, but I think that if we're talking, like, if we're and make no mistake, there was a great article, maybe not a great article, but there was an article in Auto Week that said something to the effect of, yes, IndyCar is actually competing with F1. They are. That's true. TV ratings are similar. In the States, again, we're not talking globally. In the States, IndyCar is competing with F1. Therefore, you have to differentiate your product. If you are running 80% road courses, it's not differentiating it enough, in my opinion. To a casual person, like us, hardcore, every 267 people are watching this right now. Like, everyone listening to this or watching this knows the difference between an IndyCar road race and an F1 road race. But do they actually? Do the casual people tuning into an F1 race, do the Drive to Survive fans know the difference? Probably not. That's how I feel about it. Okay, hey Kyle, if I didn't do it enough, it's time for you to get me in trouble.
All right. Well, with the theme of shit show, there was a race in Florida that might have been open wheel that could be deemed a shit show a few weeks ago, and I had the thought.
Okay.
I had the thought to ask, what's the difference between what we seem to deem a good IndyCar race and what a NASCAR shit show is? Because it seems like every time there's an IndyCar race that we get really excited about, it tends to have a lot of crashes in it. It tends to be a race that the leaders, kind of like IMSA, we were talking about today with the Sebring, and the recent finishes. It's like, it always seems like it's a massive crash fest, but when it happens in NASCAR at like a Talladega or a Daytona, it's a shit show, and we're up in arms and mad about it. So what's the difference between a good IndyCar race and a NASCAR shit show, really?
So, I think the question is, what's the difference between, like, St. Pete, a race like St. Pete, or a race like Nashville, and Nashville 21, by the way, Nashville 22. That's a whole different kettle of fish. I think the difference between, like, a Nashville or a St. Pete and a Talladega or a Daytona is that when you go to a street races have the perception that it is going to be boring. Whether or not that's been the case, especially in recent years with IndyCar, I would say it's not. But, like, overall, the perception is street courses are boring and nothing ever happens. So when we see a St. Pete race that starts with Devlin DeFrancesco flying through the air and a 20-car pileup or whatever, 7-car pileup, like, we go, oh my God, or like the leaders take each other out like McLaughlin and Grosjean did. It's like, oh my God, that's amazing. At Talladega and Daytona, it is expected that they're going to crash at least 10 times. You know it's going to happen. Everybody knows it's going to happen. Every single person in every single car, every single spotter, every single fan, every single one of the 2.5 million people that are tuning in on NBC watching Talladega know that there is going to be a crash. It's not interesting. It's just needless. There's a lot of crashing that just happens that you go, what was the point? Like the Daytona 500 a couple years ago where Christopher Bell wrecked the entire field and the rest of the race sucked. Like, if you have a big crash in IndyCar on a street course, it didn't stop the rest of the race from being, like, crazy. Like, the minute something happens in NASCAR, especially early on, it makes the rest of the race boring. Like, we've seen too much of it. We've been exposed to too much of it in NASCAR where we don't care anymore. I think, early on in the plate races, I mean, I remember this. I think I watched the 2000 Winston 500 live. And I know for a fact that I watched later restrictor plate races that were in that kind of, 2000 to 2005 to 6 to 7 era. And it was cool because it's like, wow, this is really exciting. I remember the first time I watched an IRL pack race. I remember the first time I saw an IndyCar pack race. It was 2000 Texas, and it was the spring race because IndyCar raced twice in Texas back then, believe it or not. And I thought it was the greatest thing I'd ever seen. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. 5, 6, 7 years later, I was like, this is needless. We're gonna kill somebody. The cars are flying too much. The cars are running too close. Nobody can pass. It's boring. And unfortunately, in IndyCar's case, eventually they did kill somebody. It was Dan Weldon. So, I think a shit show in IndyCar is rare, and it doesn't hinder the enjoyment for the most part of the product. Now, like Nashville last year, that kind of was bad. The Indy GP, to a certain extent, last year with the rain, it was crazy. But it doesn't happen every race. Like that was exceptional because like an Indy road course race, we just talked about that earlier in this podcast. It's mid, it's boring. Like the Indy road course is like, it is like NyQuil. It's NyQuil. This is a NyQuil PM Grand Prix every time they run there. For the most part, there have been exceptions, and those exceptions have been exciting because we didn't expect it. What is F1 secret sauce? The first 2 races of the year are boring snooze fest. Guess what happens if Albert Park is a side-by-side duel between Carlos Sainz and Fernando Alonso for the win? Everybody's going to say, that was the greatest F1 race ever. The TV rating will go through the freaking roof for the next 5 races because people are like, I can't believe I missed that. That's the difference, in my opinion.
I think one of my favorite quotes of yours on this channel that I've remembered to this day was your boxing side comparison, where it was like if a boxing match was a knockout every time, a knockout would stop being exciting.
Right.
If you see a knockout for every boxing match for 10 plus years, guess what's not exciting anymore?
Right. A Christmas every day is not Christmas anymore, right?
You've reached the peak.
Yeah.
It's like, what more why do you need to keep watching this?
Well, I almost said, maybe I will say that, like, NASCAR fan, I think maybe part of it with NASCAR, like we talked about the TV rating earlier, like I'm going to say this in a fairly nice way because I almost said it in a way that could be offensive. So we're going to try to be nice. We're going to try not to be a liability. But like in some ways, NASCAR fans are like addicted to drama. And if they don't get the drama, they tune out.
Yeah.
And like we're seeing that, like people are like, this race sucks, this race is boring. Like, but we go back to the TV ratings and what hasn't happened in the first few races of the year. Nothing kind of like scandalous. I mean, I know Hendrick got caught cheating, but like, who cares? They still won. They didn't take the wins away. Like,
Yeah.
I don't get. So I think that's part of NASCAR's problem, honestly, is that they've created this dopamine overload with all these, and then like that's why they made Atlanta the way they did. They're like, we need a third Daytona or Talladega, and everybody's mad about it.
Yep.
Because everybody sees through it, and it's like, That's tough, man. Man, that's tough. That's a tough, like, it's sad. That's a depressing note to end on. Yikes. Let's see if the super chats will raise the spirits a little bit, shall we? Wow, we did get a lot of super chats. Gary, we're going to read your super chat again. It's about time for you to start covering F1. I think we've talked a lot about F1, but Kyle, do you have any like thoughts on F1 this season? I know the big talking point has been the dominance of the Red Bull. I am with the purists that I say I also don't agree, even though I think Lewis Hamilton is a very trustworthy source on dominant F1 cars. I don't think the Red Bull is that far out in front that like it's not going to be beaten the entire season. Maybe I'm being an optimist. Do you kind of feel that way?
I mean, history shows that by the end of the season, they will catch up. Somebody will, whether it be Mercedes, Ferrari. I don't think it'll be Aston Martin. That's my opinion. I think my prediction is that Aston Martin's development won't be that good. I think for them to strike, it's going to be early in the season. But I mean, I think the big talking point has been how, like, I think everybody thinks we're gonna have another boring year. It's gonna suck, but I'll look at it, at the glass half full instead of half empty. Where I mean, it's the thing with F1, right? Like we've seen it with the Mercedes dominance, we've seen it with Schumacher dominance. It's the Vettel dominance. I mean, you have to just remember that this is a moment that's going to be remembered because Max Verstappen could go for 4 or 5 more years and break all the records. I mean, last year was a record-breaking season. He won the most races out of anybody ever.
Yep.
And when's the next time you're ever going to see that again? I mean, he won all but what, 2 races, 3 races, 4?
It was insane.
You're probably never going to see that again. So, I mean, I realized that halfway through last year and was like, all right, damn, I'm not mad about this anymore because I'm probably never going to see this for the rest of my life. And if I do, I'll be damned. But because it's just, you have to remember that, like, this, these moments are, you're going to remember them just like Lewis Hamilton dominating, just like Vettel, Schumacher. You're going to talk about these guys to your grandkids. And it's, Max Verstappen, I think, and with Red Bull's dominance, I think he could break more records this season. And I think, honestly, if they just keep with this trajectory, they could surpass what they did with Vettel, and that could go to Mercedes levels. And I mean, Max Verstappen could be looking at 7, 8 in the future, honestly, with how talented he is. We've known that for how long. So, I mean, just try and enjoy it. Look at glass half full. I mean,
damn, that's well said. That's very articulate. Well, that's you know what, Gary, you got your $2 worth for that one. Tara says, does Canapino's promising performance make an IndyCar race in Argentina more probable? I know that it's been in the news that Mark Miles was in Argentina yesterday talking about the possibility of a race in Argentina. So I would say that it's very likely that there will be an Argentinian IndyCar race. I don't think Mark Miles would do a public trip to Argentina if they weren't looking very seriously at it.
I think we knew that trip that Juncos made to do those laps with Canapino, made waves over the off season. Like they packed that place when they did those test laps.
Yeah.
And I think the series took notice of that, as they should have. And yeah, if there's an opportunity to do that, then hell yeah.
Argentina has always been a big racing country.
Yeah.
Juan Manuel Fangio is the greatest example I think I can give for that country. Like, it's forgotten, I think, a lot of times that it is a motorsports hungry country. Because frankly, it doesn't, for whatever reason, they just don't have a series like the V8 supercars or whatever.
Yeah.
There's nothing that really translates outside of the walls of Argentina. No one, and I'm telling you, man, I'm a hardcore racing fan. I know a lot of names. I know a lot of top prospects. Agustin Canapino was not on my radar. That was a surprise that he came out of nowhere, but it's clear that he was not far off of Callum Ilott in the first race. Like Callum beat him because he's got experience and he's a young guy, right? But he's a good guy. He's good.
The guy learned English in 3 weeks. I mean, that's impressive.
Extreme, yeah. And so that shows you what's going on up here. And a lot of people, all the Argentinians who have followed my channel in the most recent months as well, but they have been saying in the comment section that, like, look, he is our Scott McLaughlin. You are not ready for him. And I say, okay, I'm ready. I'm excited. I'm ready to see his development. The fact that he went to Texas and I didn't hear any bad things about him going there. No one was like, yeah, he really wadded the car up. Like, it probably, no news is good news when a rookie tests on an oval, right? So I think he's going to surprise people. He's going to surprise us. He's probably not going to surprise the Argentinians. That's for sure. Taurus also says, not enough stage cautions, needs 30. I think he was talking about the NASCAR rating. Henry Callahan says, my dad and I saw the Atlanta race and thought the finish was really good. I'm wondering what you thought of all the bump drafting present around the end, though. King's Hawaiian rolls should have won. I believe he's talking about Brad Keselowski. Saw a very funny clip, by the way, of Brad Keselowski going to the bathroom and Denny Hamlin walking in on him.
Yeah,
that
that
was
happened.
that
I
was a
also
thing.
I saw a clip of Brett Keselowski signing a package of King's Hawaiian rolls. That was my enjoyment of social media for the weekend.
Bro, those things are gonna like they don't last forever. Like they're good, but they okay. Bump drafting in Atlanta, which is interesting. I mean, like the problem with Atlanta, and again, I did not see the race, but I remember last year's race, and I've seen clips from this race. Is that like with the next gen, and I noticed this at Daytona, and Atlanta is a newer surface, so it's going to be even tougher to deal with this. The next gen doesn't pass very well on super speedways, so you have to shove the hell out of somebody to get him around.
It doesn't
So
race
that's
very
probably
well
what
in
you're
general.
talking about. What's up?
It doesn't race very well at super speedways in general. Period.
Well, that right, 100%. So like that's why
And
you saw so much shoving.
they tend to spin each other out when they shove it as well. I mean, it's all just a recipe for disaster. They can't run 3 wide. They can't really get runs to push each other anyways, and when they do, they end up wrecking each other. So it just all sucks.
And they can't get spread out either to where they can pass someone without losing
No,
10 spots. Like
exactly.
if you this is what's crazy to me is that like how soon we forget. Watch the 2007 Daytona 500. Everyone remembers the finish. No one remembers the fact that it was spread out and looked like a Michigan race for most of it. Like that's that's something that I think is just so funny sometimes. I'm like,
Denny
my
Hamlin made a point on his podcast. You just talked about '07. I was thinking about those cars, but Denny Hamlin made a point on his podcast that I want to reiterate that I had honestly never thought of. The reason why the current cars race so badly is because the bumpers are freaking huge. I never thought about this because when you
Mhm.
think about the old cars, remember how small they were height wise? You think about how much air under the car. You think about how low the noses were. So when you get behind a car now, there's basically a brick of air in front of you, creating a ton of dirty air. Back in the '07, the tiny ass bumpers, there was way more air hitting the front of your car when you were behind someone. Because when you just take two diecasts from the Gen 4, put them behind each other, and then do a little mental wind tunnel and think about it. Just think about it. Think about how stupid these new cars are. Ever since the COT, think about how dumb they are. I don't know
Right.
why it took me so long to click why dirty air is so bad now, but Danny Hamlin really did it for me.
Denny Hamlin has got a great. I the problem is they would never hire him, but God bless, like him and Dale
Yeah.
Jr. should run NASCAR.
Yeah.
You're right. That's something. Well, really, Denny's right, but I'm glad you brought it up. Like the big thing that I can never understand is, and like I don't really know. I think it's safety. I think that's why they did it. But like you look at like the late model series that Dale Jr. bought,
Mm-hmm.
and you look at the cars running in that series, and you go, man, I wish stock cars still looked like that.
Yeah.
Like they look so much better. It's a problem how much better they look. Like it's like and you're right. I mean that is such a great point that there's so much more air being moved now than in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Gee whiz. And what's crazy is, especially the ARCA cars, they're built on the same chassis
Mm-hmm.
of those cars that looked so good. Like they on purpose screwed them up. Like they have the same greenhouse. They just
Mm-hmm.
look like bricks now. It's unbelievable. That's what I cannot wrap my head around. Taurus says BOP has never been tried in open wheel. That would be IndyCar innovating in some sense. That that is an interesting point. Has BOP really not been tried? Does Super Formula use BOP? I feel like Super Formula either they use BOP or they use Success Ballast. I feel like Super Formula does. Any Japanese folks who are up at well, it would be 9:38 in the morning in Japan. Yeah, anybody who's up at 10 o'clock in the morning in Japan, let me know. Does Super Formula use Success Ballast? Do you have any thoughts on BOP not being tried in open wheel before we move on?
I mean, just give him a few years, and F1 will be doing it.
Ay ay ay, ay 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 ay. I hope not. I am so fine with F1 continuing to be F1.
Mm-hmm.
If F1 stops being F1, I will be so sad.
I'm already mad about how much of a box they put him in now.
Yeah.
Imagine how cool, because all these manufacturers are willing to spend money. We're just trying to get them to not spend money because of Haas. you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, man, if we just let these manufacturers just spend, you know how cool that would be? But no.
I just want them to open the wheels back up. I want to see different wheels again. I like F1. If you're listening, let them do the wheels again. I miss like I have some models of like the Mercedes and the Red Bull and the Haas from a couple of years ago, and I look at the wheels and I go, "That's cool, man." Like Mercedes has like little like dimples inside. It looks like a golf ball. It's like that's cool. I like that. The simple things in life, and also the Red Bull looks better with chrome rims. Bring them back. Anyway, um, Huskar Racing says, hot Indy 500 take. If Elio wins his record fifth Indianapolis 500, it will be the single biggest moment in motorsports history. Am I tripping or no? I would say you're tripping. The biggest moment in motorsports history would have been if Danica had won the 2005 500.
Yeah. 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 Not wrong. I mean, we saw what it did when she didn't win it. So I mean, if she did, could you imagine?
The minute and I shouldn't, because there's at least one female. Obviously, we know Catherine is entered for the 500. You know, like, and it wouldn't have the same juice or effect because Danica, like, she was legitimately competitive in the 2005 500. She wasn't on Dan's level or even like Vitor Mira's level in that race, but she was a top 5 car. So like her winning the race wasn't that much of a stretch. She had a chance to win that race. And also her being a rookie, her being American, kind of having it be a little bit unexpected, even though there was a lot of hype with her going in. She'd led some laps at Motegi. She actually, I think, ran the fastest qualifying lap of the entire field. So there's hype for her going in. But like that moment when she took the lead, like that was something. I've never heard that place that loud. Ever. It was so loud. But if, let's say, something happens this year and you kind of have like the 2018 500 scenario where there's 4 or 5 cars that think they can make it on fuel and Catherine Legg's the leader. And the race goes green and whoever the leader is, let's say it's Scott Dixon because Dixon curse. Dixon can't get around the slower cars quick enough. Catherine motors on to victory. Does it have the same juice as that Danica win or the Danica potential win? I don't know, but I think that's that could happen. That could happen this year.
That would certainly be insane. I would scream my head off if that happened. That would be absolutely wild.
Would it be the biggest motorsport? Like, because a female driver has never won a race on that level. Like Danica won at Motegi at midnight or 3 a.m. in the U.S., right? Like,
she won at probably the worst time to do it, but she did it.
And then she ruined the last 15 minutes of Champ Car because they did side-by-side interview with Danica. Like, this historic moment happening, and we're talking to Danica. Hungover Danica, by the way. Definitely hungover. Like, if you watch that, you're like, man, she was, like, drinking on the plane the whole way over. But anyway, is that what would be the biggest motorsport moment ever? Because I don't think it's Elio winning the 5th, because I don't think that would have, like, the global talking done.
That would be Elio winning the 5th. Do you think that would be the biggest win at the Speedway ever? Because it'd be the most 500s?
I think Elio's 4th was the moment. I don't think the 5th would have the same juice.
You don't think going past 4 will be the juice?
No. I mean, way you have to think about the scenario that 2021 was. It's the first race back. Most everybody at that race had not been at the 2020 race. So everybody was all like ready to watch a race. Like they were like, yeah, man, the Indy 500's back. We're ready. And then you have this great duel between Alex Palou and Elio. And Elio wins. You get your first Indy 500 back as a fan. Elio wins. It's his 4th win. It's history. Everybody's climbing the fence. Like, I don't think it would quite have the same. I could be wrong. We'll see this May. but I don't think it would have quite the same juice as that one because I
I mean,
think
now that we're just talking about May, who wins the race? Who wins the race this year that you know has the same? Is it TK?
TK would be a big one. I've
But
always
like
said
who?
if Marco won,
Because I
that place
remember
would fall
win
down.
number 4 for Elio, like you said, like there were fans climbing the fences in turn 3, and it was freaking awesome. I'm ashamed I didn't climb the fence, to be honest. But uh,
um, no,
like who?
TK like winning. I think he would not stop celebrating. I think there would be like because like he's gonna retire at the end of that race either way.
Mhm.
Um, and I even brought that up to him. I asked him a question at the press conference when we were there, and I said, TK, any way this turns out, your first and last win are on a 500-mile race. He won his first race at Michigan in '99, and his current last win was Fontana in 2014. So if he went out with the Indy 500, and his first win and his last win are 500 milers, I think that would be amazing. And we know how I mean we were both there in 2013. We know how excited, and 2013 I think was the worst attended 500
I
ever.
wasn't there.
You weren't there. Oh, it was your fault. You weren't there.
I didn't go until 14. I was a year late.
That's right. That's right. But yeah, the 2013 crowd was not big. I mean, it was big. I mean, it was big, right? But like, it wasn't like now the stands are pretty much totally full. Like 13, especially where I sit, it was almost completely empty. Not completely empty, but I mean, it was like half full. And that crowd was so loud for TK and so energized, so happy that he won. TK would be a big one. I'm trying to think of another one. Like, I feel like, yeah, Catherine winning it probably would be loud just because of the history. Marco winning it would be huge. Again, history. I feel like I'm forgetting somebody. I feel like there's somebody else who the crowd just loves, and I'm blanking on it. You know what? The crowd likes Rossi.
That's true.
That's a thing. That's a thing that a lot of people don't realize.
They like Pato last year too.
I was gonna say Pato. I was like, that's who I'm forgetting. Yeah, Pato winning would be. I don't think, but I mean, we're talking like you're saying like close to Elio levels of reaction. Probably not. Not in the first one. I don't think. Not in the first one. I think if he won in Mexico City, yeah, you would get that. You would get that kind of reaction. But in Indianapolis, yeah, the crowd would be Colton. Colton, I think, would generate a big cheer. Oh, wait. I'm stupid. I'm so stupid. The chat, some of the people are saying it. Well, there's two answers. Connor Daly is the obvious one. Connor and Ed. Ed would be the other one.
Ed would be huge.
Yeah. So, yeah, Connor and Ed. I don't know why I didn't think of them. I'm an idiot. Kyle Larson would be huge, but Kyle Larson ain't running until next year. Did you hear that he's running the next 2 Indy 500s?
Yep.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
Well, I knew it's such a Larson thing because, like he said, if he was ever going to run the 500, he was going to do it right. And now I'm hearing from you on Twitter that probably won't test until after the season, and it probably won't be on an oval. So
I did hear that.
That sounds very Kyle Larson.
There's some interesting. I cannot go into specific. There's some interesting things that might be happening with the Kyle Larson, and that's all I can say.
I hope that car is red, white, and blue and has Hendrick cars over it, like the Cup car.
I think it. Well, I don't know. Will you? I could see them swapping the red for orange.
Do you think they do the thing and they swap Pato's number and let Larson run the 5? Do you think they do the thing?
Oh God, maybe.
Do you think they run Pato
that would require an Arrow McLaren car winning the championship, because then they could run whoever's in the one, or run Larson in the one.
Remember one year they ran remember the 100th running when they just randomly ran Kimball as 42? Like, it's been done.
Yeah, that was dumb. I don't remember why they did that.
It made no sense. It wasn't even the same font as the Cup 40. They brought the Cup Series 42 to the Speedway.
I feel like
unveiled them together.
I feel like there was some reason they did that, but it
doesn't change
my mind.
It doesn't change the point that they unveiled it with a Cup car and made it some sort of. I think it had something to do with like the Kimball sponsor, but the fact that they had the Cup 42 there was weird because the 42 on Kimball's car wasn't even the same font.
And they brought Larson. Like, Larson was on the grounds.
Yeah.
Why did they do that?
Yeah.
I cannot. I haven't thought about that in forever.
Yeah. Weird times. Weird
Yeah,
times we lived
and
in.
everybody thought like, oh man, like Kyle's definitely going to do this with Ganassi,
Yeah.
right? Wink. Yeah, Target's definitely not leaving. Wink. Yeah, it'll be easy for that to happen. Do you know Target blocked me on Twitter?
Really?
Yeah,
What?
I wasn't even that spicy. I think I yelled at them. I was like, "Hey, you guys know that Scott Dixon and Kyle Larson are like dominating right now, and you aren't sponsoring them." And I said that in like 2017, and they got mad and blocked me.
Target blocked you.
Target block. Target. The two celeb blocks I have are Target and the Pat McAfee show. Why Pat McAfee blocked me? I have no freaking clue.
What?
No clue. Yeah. No, I think it was because he tweeted something like stupid, like in 2013, and I like replied to it, and he blocked me over it. So it's so long ago that like it wasn't anything to do with the fact that we were both like in this space. It was that. It was when he was still a punter, and I was just a nobody. Nobody.
Yeah, you were probably just like an angry Colts fan one day. You were like, Pat McAfee.
Yeah, that was probably it. That was probably it. So Pat, I'm sorry. Sorry.
So you didn't hear about the Brett Favre news? Oh, You mean the Aaron Rodgers news? Same thing.
That's funny. Well,
I didn't do that on purpose either.
Oh no, we're talking about football. We still got super chats to go. We got stop talking about that. No, enough people quote tweet Pat McAfee that I see everything that he talks about. Napa Racing Fan has a couple of super chats. He says notable drivers in NASCAR at COTA entry list: Ed Jones in trucks, Kimi Räikkönen, Jenson Button, Jordan Taylor, Connor Daly, and Jimmy Johnson in the Cup Series. Yes, I'm excited for COTA. No stages.
Yeah, that's what I'm most excited about.
So
I totally forgot about Ed Jones and trucks.
Yeah, that's a weird one, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think COTA's going to be here. Hear me out. What happens if COTA is the only NASCAR race that increases in ratings all year long?
The F1 effect.
F1 effect, and then I will immediately start the narrative that it's stages. It's literally, I'll just say it's the stages, bro. Just get rid of the stages.
Yep. I hope so. The only race that increases in ratings is the one without stages, then I'm definitely on board. I'm picketing out front of NASCAR headquarters tomorrow if that happens.
Napa Racing Fan also asks, will 100 Days to Indy bring new fans to the sport? This could be a Kyle gets David in trouble question. Kyle!
Yeah, probably like 10 fans.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to be that negative, but I don't think it's going to have the drive to survive effect, but it's not going to be as big, I don't think.
I have a wait and see attitude with the TV show. I think we really just need to keep our expectations in check, both positive and negative with it.
I think it's going to be good. I think it's going to be a good show.
It looks like a quality production. That trailer was great. Pato in a Cobra doing a burnout I was like, yep, there you go. There's marketing. Mm-hmm. But like, do we think it's going to have an effect to the point where we're like going, yeah, IndyCar is the new hot thing? No, I don't think so. I think that would be amazing if it happened. But I think I said this in my video when I talked about it. Like, this is a building block. It's not the firework. It's not the spark that's going to set this thing off. It's a building block. If you have a TV show and it gets decent numbers and it gets some people interested in it, or it's something that you can stream on a platform that other people will be able to see it and potentially get exposed to IndyCar, that's what you want. This is not a magic bullet. It's not going to, magically turn everything around. It's a building block, and it's one of many building blocks that need to be put down. That's how I look at the TV show. Taurus also says, between McLaughlin and Canapino, his touring cars / V8 supercar style series a surprisingly compatible for driving skills to IndyCar? It's an interesting thought process. Honestly, like, IndyCars are heavier than they've ever been, and they're not going to get any lighter. Tire management is a thing in touring cars. Dirty air is a thing in touring cars, especially in the V8 supercars. Um, there are things that translate. I think the big thing is with Canapino and McLaughlin is, unlike Jimmy Johnson, they're coming over before they're 30 or just past 30. Like, they have gas in the tank, so to speak, to muscle an open wheel car around. Like, if Jimmy Johnson came over to IndyCar in 2008, I think we're talking completely different about his trajectory with IndyCar racing, So I think really what we're just seeing is the equivalent, the Argentinian equivalent and the Australian/New Zealand equivalent of Jimmy Johnson coming to IndyCar in their prime. That's how I feel about it. Alexander Stegall says, I thought IndyCar Chicagoland 2009, 2010 were the greatest oval races ever. So when they went to Texas, Kansas, or Homestead, my 14-year-old self thought it was boring because it wasn't pack racing. How do you feel about that? I mean, I know I was younger. I was in high school in 2009, 2010. So, like, I was already at the point where I was able to YouTube kart races from back in the day and say, oh, I really like the Milwaukee races. And it's not like IndyCar's product was not that at that time. So I was like, I don't know if I like this anymore. Mm-hmm. Your thoughts on that particular era, like 09 IndyCar oval racing?
I would have loved it. I think everybody in the younger crowd loved that type of racing. The older I get, and I was 11, 10 years old when Vegas happened in 2011, and it's that, being that young and seeing that's an eye opener. I don't want to see anything near that ever again. And I just, pack racing in IndyCar can be a thing too, because you look at 2015 Auto Club, when there's tire saving involved, there's a little bit of lifting. Then you look at multiple grooves. Then it's like, yeah, okay. But you look at that era where it's just a bunch of cars just flat to the floor, just can't go anywhere, leader can't leave. It's good things aren't going to come out of that if you do it for a long enough period of time. And I don't think we should ever, the teams, the drivers, all know that we cannot go back to that ever again. So, and I certainly don't want to watch that ever again. I mean, already as it is at super speedway races, there's times where my heart is in my throat just watching these guys, and it's it is what it is, but to that level is just too much. So it's a hard pass.
Yeah, I mean, and like, you're right. Like, the big thing that I take away, and when I rewatch those races, I just look at that and go, oh my God. I mean, they're taking so, like, this, they are dodging bullets left, right, and center. Like, high-speed oval racing is dangerous already. Texas, like, yeah, I mean, like, they're, like, I already said it in, I think, maybe 1 or 2 streams ago. Like, 28 cars going into the first corner at Texas on the start, that's going to be sketchy as hell. Like, you don't need them running like that for 200 more laps, So, like, yes, you don't want it to be single file, boring or whatever, but I think that you're right. I mean, like, those IRL races were so ridiculous that handling almost meant nothing. I mean,
exactly.
They just drove around the white line the whole time. I mean, to me, that was way too far in the other direction. I want to see multiple grooves. I want to see guys be able to try things.
I want to see tire degradation.
And tire deg, guys having to manage the race, guys, comers and goers, and the ability for someone to be excellent and be able to pull away if they have the right combination. I'm fine with that. I don't have a problem with that. So, like, yeah, I think the pack racing of the old wasn't what we needed in IndyCar. There's better ways to oval race open wheel cars. Mm-hmm. Henry Callahan says, a sprint car ace contesting the 500 and we don't get 1 mile dirt tracks to go with it. Darn. Well, it's probably, the problem is we don't have enough 1 mile dirt tracks left in the country to really do it properly. IndyCar couldn't run a dirt race. Like they would need to totally change their cars if that's what you're suggesting. It would be an experiment, but I don't know. I think we're probably way too. USAC just shouldn't have banned the rear engine sprint car. And I know a lot of USAC people are going to be very upset for me for saying that, but I look at where things went from that point in history, and I say you screwed up. That's my opinion. Matthew Klein says, "Will you see Larson full-time IndyCar run in 2025?" I would say I would like to see that. I don't think so. I think you'll see Larson maybe more than the Indy 500, but I don't think it would be a full-time deal. Now, other elements, who knows? Things could happen. Interesting things could be happening. I don't know. But Larson full-time, I don't think so. Money's too good in NASCAR.
Yeah, I think at the end of his career, you might see that just based on how much he likes sprint car racing, because a 17 race schedule in IndyCar is a lot more appealing than 36 races if you want to do sprint car racing. But the money's too good in NASCAR, and I think he'd like to, rack up a few more wins and championships in NASCAR before he just goes to something else.
And I think he's very much on the Kyle Busch path of like he wants his kid to have a development ladder.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that is to be with NASCAR and be in the good graces of Hendrick. Now, that being said, and I've asked Hendrick officials about this publicly, it's pretty clear to me that they're trying to expand, right? Like they've been in IMSA, they're going to be in IndyCar, they're going to Le Mans this year with a effing NASCAR. Hendrick Motorsports is growing beyond NASCAR. They are diversifying. So is it completely outside of the realm of possibility that Kyle Larson could theoretically do full-time IndyCar for Hendrick and, keep his kid in the Hendrick good graces? Sure. Do I think that's super, super likely sitting here in early 2023? No. That's how I feel about it. I don't know. We'll see. All right, Kyle. That brings us to the end of the podcast. I know you like to tell us what racing is coming up this weekend. What's coming up this weekend?
Well, we got Supercross.
You love
NASCAR at Coda.
Yep.
We have the Ed Jones in a truck. Make sure you tune into that. Xfinity is
I know
running
Pato
too,
will
right?
be tuning into that. Pato's going to watch it.
Xfinity is running too, right?
Right?
Saturday? Yeah, it should be.
I don't know.
No F1 this week. No IndyCar.
Eventually there'll be IndyCar.
Eventually, someday.
Allegedly.
Is that next weekend or 2 weeks away?
I think I was working on this today. I can tell you. It's next week.
Okay.
I still haven't booked a flight yet.
Oh, you're going?
Allegedly, we gotta. It's a whole thing. It's nothing bad. It's just procedural things that are tough with Texas Motor Speedway. So the plan is to be there. We just gotta work out the SMI credentialing system, which is a bit different than other places, but it's not impossible to work.
I think that's it for racing this week.
Wow, a lean week, unfortunately, but we have Texas to look forward to next weekend, and also we have Texas to talk about because I'm sure pretty much everybody's probably going to be tuning in for Coda NASCAR. It should be an interesting time. I'm looking forward to seeing how the road racing guys get on, and I'm looking to see how a NASCAR race for the first time in 5 years goes without stages. Hell yeah, brother. Thank you guys for watching. And I will see you, and hopefully you'll hear us in the next stream.